Azek's eyes jumped open at the alert that was shining directly into his face. He untangled his tail and licked clean his eyes, before staring at it again. His cargo master was repeatedly activating the emergency alert just outside the cargo bay. "Syl, bring up the cargo bay access. What's going on down there?" Silence met him. Turning, he saw Syl was absent. He was alone on the bridge. There had been no response from Garrosh to the false contract he had created. Moving to Syl's console, he jabbed the buttons. The benefit of the trade system that the Zilpic practiced was Azek had come up through the whole structure of the crew, and there was very little of the crew's duties he did not know inside and out. He brought up the view screen, and felt his tail latch itself around the base of Syl's chair in panic. A large group of armed humans were there, dressed in white and gray clothing, their faces uniformly dark black, with lighter circles around their eyes. His cargo master was curled in a ball on the ground, and one of the humans was lifting its foot up, where it clearly had just stood on Atris's tail. As he watched, mind whirring as to what to do, and how things had reached this point, he saw the humans begin to move down the corridor, one of them stopping to crouch next to Atris's prone form. The human holding a coil pistol was speaking with one holding a large human weapon rather than a coil gun. Then, the pistol wielder made some sign to the one who stood on Atris's tail. The tail stepper slung his coil gun onto his back, came over, and then, to Azek's shock, picked Atris up in a single smooth motion, carrying her easily on its shoulder, despite her being easily a foot taller than it. Azek moved away from the console, and began to move towards the door to his personal quarters. The armor in there from the chef would stop a coil gun round, and might keep him alive if the humans were as geared for violence as the Harchan had implied their military was. Atris's tail felt around for something to grip onto. It found nothing, as she bounced along on the shoulders of the strange creatures that had captured her. Her wrists and ankles were bound with some sort of binder, not painfully, but tight enough to stop her from being able to move. She did, however, feel weirdly comforted by the sheer amount of heat that the thing carrying her was giving off. The High Trader charged his crew for raising the temperature above not uncomfortable levels in their rooms, and right now, there was approximately a most of her disposable income amount of heat going into her body. That wasn't to say she wasn't still panicking, as from what she knew of warmbloods who were this aggressive and proactive, they usually were carnivores or omnivores, and she couldn't shake the idea that she might be spare rations. Her collar began to slowly filter odd words to her, as the language AI within it began to pick up on odd words and body language from the things around her. Find important points. Obey. Find important people. Obey. Keep way out safe. Obey. At least they seemed to be genuinely intelligent and individualistic. No hive mind. That was hell to negotiate with, as she had on occasion had the displeasure of doing so for supplies. She risked opening her eyes slightly, and saw that she was upside down, staring at the floor as she was bounced along. Turning her head, she found herself looking up at the tallest of the things. Now she could see the blackness of its skin was some sort of paste, and around its hairline where its cloth head covering shifted, there was a thin line of pale skin. She could also see that the things were moving to the crew area, and at an impressive rate. She could feel the breathing of the thing carrying her, and it had remained a steady rate the entire time. Suddenly, she realized the taller thing was looking at her, and she tried to close her eyes quickly. Her translation AI disagreed. Awake. Stop. Refusal. She wasn't certain if that was a good thing. She heard a door open ahead of them, and her ears filled with shouting of the crew, where most were enjoying a meal before they moved towards the rim of the system. Loud shouts came back from the things who had her prisoner. She desperately hoped the next sound wouldn't be the retort of coil guns. Jack ducked beneath the table. A large group of very angry humans had just interrupted the pre-slipstream meal, armed with coil guns. Jack was very frustrated he hadn't decided to invest in a personal interface collar like the officers and the High Trader, as he would have been able to understand what the humans were saying after all the data he'd been exposed to during the negotiations with the Harchan. He saw several of his crew had followed his example, and realized that, for once, he was the Zilpic with the best idea of what was happening and how to solve it. Perhaps know enough to even achieve something. Perhaps get marked for a heroism bonus by the High Trader. Maybe get a pay raise. Slowly, he stood, letting his tail wrap around another crew members, as he hoped the humans had no idea how scared he was. He raised his hands above his head, imitating the humans he'd seen being arrested by the Harchan during the meeting with the Harchan commander. Multiple coil guns pointed at him, but when they saw his hands raised, they lowered slightly. He saw nearly all the crew were beneath tables or behind flipped ones, while a few who were nearest the door the humans had entered from were curled up on the ground, protecting their vulnerable throats and bellies. He slowly moved to the side so he could be seen more clearly, and pointed up and down at himself, trying to indicate he wasn't armed, and that he wasn't looking to cause any problems. Daniel raised his eyebrows as he saw one of the lizards emerge, hands raised above its head. All the others were either hiding or curled up as their prisoner had done. "Let's see where this goes," he told his men, before repeating it in Nepali for the newer recruits, who wouldn't have a perfect grasp of English yet. He noticed the prisoner lizard looking confused as he spoke the first time, its head turning towards him. He also now realized that all the other lizards here weren't wearing the same collar as the one they had, nor were they wearing his colorful clothing. Perhaps they'd had the fortune to capture an officer, nearly entirely by mistake. Perhaps it even had one of the translation devices the roaches had used to make their edicts and orders. He took a step forward, then turned sharply at a rattling sound coming from a rapidly rising shutter at the other side of the room. It revealed a somewhat larger lizard, its mouth open, and the frill around its neck bright and blue, raised fully. More importantly, it was holding a long, flat blade in one hand, and in the other a pistol like its own. Some very angry hissing came from it, and the retort of a bolt filled the room. He felt a sharp pain in his left arm, as he saw the lizard drop back down, as the air where it had been was filled with bolts and bullets from a weapon that had been made when his grandfather had been a young man. Angry Nepali filled the room as the Gurkhas finished shooting, and he saw the lizard, who had stood up, had dived back down to the floor, as well as a shaking tail rise up above the counter, pistol clasped in its tail, before the gun was thrown into the room. Padam slowly moved over towards it, coil gun still aimed at the open shutter, until he was able to recover it. Devi, who had been bringing up the rear, moved next to him, and snorted. "Of course these lizards are such bad shots they can't hit an officer from less than 10 meters, the snarky sharpshooter said, indicating Daniel's arm. Daniel saw the bolt had carved a half-inch line through the side of his upper arm, the friction having somewhat seared the wound closed, though it was leaking. He put it down to adrenaline that he wasn't screaming in pain. He allowed Devi to apply a field dressing, binding it down, as with gestures from their weapons. The rest of the Gurkhas got the more violent lizard out of its room, and moved the rest of the prisoners to the far side of the room, where they wouldn't be able to rush the squad. He was about to test his theory about their first prisoner being able to understand him, when the door on the far side of the room opened, and a lizard, still pulling on elaborate robes, covered in different colored gems over some sort of bulky plate harness, and a large golden collar covering the bottom of his face nearly slid in, before pulling up short. Then, to his surprise, a mechanically neutral voice, like a digital assistant, began to speak as he saw the new arrival straighten himself up. "Greetings, humans. I am High Trader Azik, captain of this vessel. Please direct all enquiries to me, as well as any negotiation."